Again, we're going to draw fruit. I right-clicked on it, said copy image on the internet, and I'm going to go over to Illustrator as it's loading up here. I'm going to start with a new file inside of Illustrator. If I can get Illustrator to start here. File, new. And I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to paste. To paste my fruit inside of here, I go under Edit, Paste, Edit, Paste. If it's too big for my artboard, I might shrink it down. If I put my cursor along the edge, I can shrink it down, holding down the Shift key to keep it in proportion. And I'm just going to draw it. Don't worry about the size right now. I kind of like to make it big and then shrink it down later. Again, if you remember from last class, there was a couple things we did. One is we locked the layer. And the second thing we did was suck up the colors using the eyedropper and making our own palette. Do you remember doing that? Okay, so you can lock the background layer. That way you don't mess with your fruit. But you can still suck up the color. Even if you lock that layer, you can still use the eyedropper to suck up the colors. Oh, maybe you can't. Oh, maybe you can't. I lied. You can't do that. I thought you still could. I lied. Let's not lock it yet. Unlock it. Don't lock it yet. Hi. Uh-oh. Yes? I want you to keep that. Oh, wait, did I sign? Where am I supposed to sign? Right here? Okay, now take it. Okay, you ready? Easiest way I found to suck up the colors is to move the palette over kind of close. And I don't know why I have this. Some of you last class, you didn't have this little color swatch up here. Do some of you not have this color swatch up here? I don't know how to get that on or off. Maybe options? I don't know. Why? Some of you have this and some of you don't. I don't know why. If it doesn't show up, you can suck up the color from over here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make myself a folder. See how you have little folders here? Or groups. They call them color groups. To make a color group, I hit the little folder right here where it says New Color Group. It's the third one from the right side. Let's call it Apple. Whatever you want to call it. It makes a little folder over here. Oh, it automatically put white in there because white was the one I have right there. But what you can do is you could use your eyedropper, suck up a color, and then take it from here and drag it on top of your in your folder right there. Or if this is not showing up, use your eyedropper, suck up a color, and you can drag from here into there. Oh, no. Yeah, from there into there. So suck up a color, you can drag from here into there. Suck up a color, nice dark green. Stem color, leaf color. It doesn't matter. This is just a starting point. I usually tend to change the colors anyways later on. Nice bright green there. There we go. But it's a good place to start as far as getting colors. Once you get your colors inside your folder, you can rearrange them in here. Maybe put all the light colored ones together, the dark ones together. You can drag them around in here. You could drag them around in there. So you got a nice sort of range of colors to start with. It's better than having to try and mix your own colors as you're going along. So go get yourself a... So now I can lock my layer. Remember we were going to lock the layer and it didn't let us choose colors when I locked it. I don't know why. But I'm going to lock my layer now. I thought it used to let you choose colors when I lock layer. I swear it used to. I don't know why they've changed it. I'm going to make a new layer, and let's call it main apple, because I might make the stem and the leaf as a separate layer. Then again, don't worry about, there's a big dark area here and some bright area up here. Don't worry about that. All I do is I make the main outline first. What I'll do here is I'll make separate objects. Like for the dark section up there, I'm actually going to make that as a separate object over top of the apple and then blend it. Remember I talked about blending, then blend that dark area into the main shape. So don't try and think that you need to try and get this dark area where the stem is coming out. I'll make that as a separate object. Same with the highlights too. Those really bright highlights, I make them as a separate object and blend them in with the stuff underneath it. Don't think you need to try and make it in the gradient mesh is what I'm trying to say. Don't try and think you have to put all the colors in the gradient mesh. A lot of little colors and little things you can do as separate objects, and you'll see how you can blend them. So here we go. We're going to use the pen tool, which is this one right here. I kind of tend to start on an angle, kind of, or on a curve. I like to start maybe right here, and I'm going to curve a little bit. Look, remember the directional arms? I pull the directional arm in the direction I want the curve to go. So, see how it's curving already? I'm going to come all the way down here, trying the least amount of points you can. What I'm doing when I'm making a determination of where to put the point, I'm kind of putting the point halfway between where I want the next point to be. So when you're putting a point down, see, I put one point, I got a curve started, right? I'm going to put another point kind of way down here, so I'm putting this one kind of halfway between. Halfway between, because I know I'm going to put one here. And so to get this curve right, I'm going to probably put one somewhere right around here. It's like halfway between here and there. Do you see that? So think about it. It takes a little determination, but if I come over here, I can put a curve kind of right about here, start dragging a little bit. There we go. There we go. And I'm going to come all the way down here. See how now it's nice? See how perfect I did that by putting a point halfway between where you think the next point will be. And then I'm going to kind of put one right about here. And then again halfway between, maybe right about here. It doesn't have to be perfect. Following it to a T, and then maybe right about here. I'm gonna go somewhere right about here. There we go. So try and make an apple with the least amount of points you can, or at least the beginning shape. After I have my main object, I'm going to use the black or the direct selection tool here, select it, and then to duplicate it, I'm just going to kind of throw it off to the corner here by holding my option key down. Again, I'm using a black selection tool. I'm going to hold my option key and I'm going to click and drag to make a second one. In fact, what I might do is I'm going to move this one even away from it so I could see them. Right? So I could see how I'm going to blend it. So, it's hard to see how to make the gradient mesh when you have an object over top of it. So to do the gradient mesh is this option right here. So I'm going to go and again, I kind of start, I got a little highlight right here. I got a really bright highlight here, and then you got the kind of middle color here. And then you have a little highlight along the edge there, and a kind of a dark line along the edge there. And then you have a bright area over here because of the lighting. So I might, make a determination. I might put a gradient mesh right there. And then when I go to make the second mesh, remember I talked about how you might want to put it along the line so you don't make extra lines. I might make one kind of in the middle here. I'm going to make one in the middle, and then one over here. Kind of like that. I don't know why, but that's what I'm going to do. Trying to make this line, you can see there's kind of a line that goes along right here. So by putting some dots down, I'm going to zoom in. Putting some dots down, I can zoom in, and then I'm going to add my swatches. I got way too many windows open here. Let me move some of these around. Move some of these around. Okay, there we go. So again, let's not worry about all the colors up here for right now. What I'm more interested in is getting a darker color in here. Ooh, that's too dark. I don't know. And a light color here. Oh, that's too bright. There we go. Then a lighter color here. Nope, not there. Remember, you can move your mesh around. I tend to use dark colors along the bottom. Then there's kind of a dark area up here. So it's just a kind of trying to fine tune what you want to do here. You know, really bright color along the edge there. This one's a little darker there. I don't know, I exaggerated a little bit, but at least get a starting point, I think, is the key here. Again, some problems you may run into with the gradient mesh is if you take a point and you put it too close to the edge of another one, you get this kind of line. So be careful when you're moving things around. Again, you can use the directional arms to indicate how a curve might go. Okay, at least that's. Let's talk about the putting a texture on top. So again, I have a shape that's kind of a whoosh. Don't do that. Use the black arrow when you're moving it. I have a kind of an apple shape, and then I have a duplicate of the whole outline. I might duplicate that again, so I always have a backup copy of that. So there's a couple ways I could make a texture inside here and then put it on top and blend it with the one underneath it. That's kind of the concept. I could draw my own texture, like I told you, which I might do, which I'm going to do. Or you could actually have it calculate a texture for you using an artistic effect. So let's draw our own first. So I'm going to zoom in, kind of looking at my apple here. In fact, I might even just draw the texture over top of the apple. You can see there's kind of some little white dots in there with some dark things. You can see them in there. Kind of starry looking thing. So I might just go and use the ellipse tool, maybe draw a little dark kind of. I'm going to go zoom in real close. And maybe make that a dark color. And then I might draw another ellipse over top of that and maybe make that a light color. Kind of something like that. Okay. Maybe make it a little brighter. There we go. You know, something like that. If I zoom out, you can barely see it, but that's okay. That's what we're looking for. So then I'm going to duplicate this a little bit and make it kind of a little area, a little pattern with that. So again, I made a little pattern right there, and I'm going to duplicate it, maybe change the size and duplicate it, kind of look at the way that it's patterned in there, maybe change the size, not all the little dots on inside a piece of fruit is the same, right? Some might be bigger than others, some might be smaller than others. I don't know, something like that. It's kind of a little pattern. So once you have, you know, a little pattern like that, you could select all the objects. And again, there's a pattern making feature inside of Illustrator. It's a little complicated than it used to be. They tried to make it a little bit, I don't know how to describe it, but it used to be a lot simpler is what I'm trying to say. If you go underneath Window, you'll notice there's one for the pattern options. And in the pattern options, I can then go and pull up Make Pattern in the upper right corner of the pattern options. And it goes in this pattern making mode. It says a new pattern has been added to the swatches panel. Any changes made in pattern editing mode will be applied to the swatch upon exit. So then you can see what it's going to look like. If you zoom out, you can see kind of how it's going to be. And that's fine. It looks, you know, that's sort of what I want. I want a kind of a little dot. I'm not going to even adjust it. I'm going to kind of leave it like it is. If it's a little bit too much, you can actually go and, I don't know, you can move things around in this mode. You can move objects around. So you can see how I'm moving an object and I'm adjusting the pattern. Do you see that? So I'm just moving one object and you can see how the pattern's being adjusted. So if something's too close together and it doesn't quite look right, you can actually select the object and then I'm using the arrow key, maybe move it around a little bit to make it look a little better. Do you see how I did that? You can adjust the objects and you can see them moving as you're adjusting them. When you're done with your pattern, you think, hey, that looks cool, you can hit done. Now you don't need this pattern anymore. Once it's been made a pattern and it's in your swatches, I didn't give it a name, but I should have. You can actually remove these objects from the original. You can delete those. We don't need those right now. You've already made the pattern. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to fill my object, my shape that I made with the new pattern. Then I'm going to take it and move it over top of. So I'm going to put this kind of over top here for now, right now, so I could see it. And I take my object and put it over top. And so you can see your pattern on top. I know you can't see this very well, but here's what it looks like. Then it doesn't look quite, it's like, oh God, really? Is that what it looks like? Well, we haven't blended it yet. Remember I talked about blending it. Okay, so right now I've taken this pattern I made and I just put it, it's the same shape as the apple, right? It's the same shape as the apple, and I put it over top of my gradient mesh. But what I want to do with that pattern, and if you open up the layers window, you can see you got two objects. I got my pattern one. I can turn the eyeball on and off and see it. Hey, look at it. It's over top. It's over top. So I'm going to select it. Make sure it's selected. The pattern that's over top. Make sure it's selected. Okay. Then what I'm going to do though is I'm going to go to the transparency option under transparency. And in the transparency option, you have something called opacity, which changes the opacity of the pattern. So I can turn that down a little bit if you want. You can see right now it's already blending. Look at that, it's blending already. But what that's doing is it's just changing the opacity of the dots themselves. It's not taking in consideration the color that's underneath it. If you want to be able to take advantage of the color that's underneath, to bring the object that's underneath and the object on top and kind of blend them together, you go to where it says normal right here under transparency. You see how it says normal? There's these blending modes right here, and the blending modes then will take into consideration the colors underneath as well as the colors on top. And the one I like to use a lot is screen, like I told you. That might work well, maybe not. So use a combination of opacity in there. Let's see, color, that really doesn't show up. Luminosity, whoosh, that's too much. Exclusion, that doesn't look right. Difference, whoosh, that doesn't look right. Hard light, that doesn't look bad. Soft light, ooh, that one actually turned out pretty well. So maybe a little soft light and turn the opacity down. And if you look closely, you'll see the soft light, in the bright areas will kind of get blown away, but in the darker areas. So just using kind of a combination of blending mode and opacity, you can get the dots over top of it to blend with the one underneath it. Soft light overlay, that's not too bad. Color dodge, whoosh, no. Screen, no, that didn't work really well. Lighten, that tend to work well. I like the lighten, gets kind of blown away, but you got some dots in the other one. Color burn, whoosh, no. Multiply, darken. At least for this example, the soft light seemed to work well. So a little combination of, and let me turn off the background there so we can see it. A little combination of opacity in there, and you get yourself a little texture. That's one way of going about it. So try that for a moment. I'll show you a different way. That's just one way. Okay, making your own texture is all fun and good, but sometimes it's hard. So I'm going to move it over there. Another way to go about it, here's my apple piece here. Another way to make a pattern, to go over top of your fruit is to use what's called artistic effects. They're located underneath effects. There's a whole artistic effects. I tend to use some of these sometimes, and again, I'm doing it on an object that's over top, not the object with the gradient mesh. The object here, a second object, and under effects, artistic effects, there's a whole bunch of them here. The one I like to use is under sketch. Which one do I like to use? Stylize? No, I want to put a texture. Oh, there it is, texture. So under effect, texture, and then grain. Grain will give you a bunch of little dots. Grain. And you can see the dots in there. You can add some contrast to that. And you change the type of grains you want. Yeah, sprinkles, clumpy. There we go, clumpy looks good. So there's a bunch of, so I use the one that says contrast. Ooh, look at that. Ooh, no. 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 Clumped. That looks good. So again, I was underneath effects, texture. And so you could apply a texture to your object and do the same thing. Take this it looks kind of crazy right now. You put it over top of your object though, and then you go to your blending modes or your transparency, and of course turn the opacity down, and then maybe try a blending mode, and check it out. Looks really good actually. Look at that. It gave it a texture. Look at that. Just a simple texture. You might not be able to see that here too well. If I turn up the opacity a little bit, you'll see it a little better. I don't know if you could see that, but it's a great, whoa, I don't want to do that. It's a great way of applying a simple texture to my apple. Look at, it's there. If I zoom in real quick, you could actually see it. Again, it was underneath the one I used. Again, instead of making your own little dots like I did, that's a lot of work. Just go underneath, grab your separate object, go underneath effects, texture, and then there's a whole bunch in there. I use grain to give me a kind of a pattern, and then I put it right over top of my apple, and it gives me just a nice simple texture. Use a blending mode. I think screen works really well in that mode, and it gives you a really nice texture. So again, maybe try some of those, or it's under. Again, I'm going to move my object away. Let's see this one way out of the way. I'm going to move. Whoops. I'm going to move my object away. Oops. Don't have anything left. Oh, I lost my. There it is. Move my object away. Again, you have a kind of a dark area up here. So you're just like, wow, how am I going to get that? Well, I'm going to make it a separate object up here. A separate object. To do that, you could just simply use, I'm going to use the pencil tool because I'm running out of time here. And I'm just going to draw a little separate object up here, kind of in the shape of what it looks like there, exaggerate it a little bit. So I have a separate object. Let me darken it, make a dark color in it. Then, in order to get it to blend with the object, instead of using the transparency and the blending mode, I'm going to blur it. Blur it. If you remember the clouds, remember the clouds that we did, right? So an easy way to get this object to kind of blend with the one underneath it is to go underneath effects. You can use a blur and a Gaussian blur, kind of like we did with the clouds. And not too much of a blur, just a little. And so if you blur it a little bit, and then I'm going to kind of, so I made an object kind of the shape I want, and then I blurred it, and then if I move it over top, I can kind of put it in there, and you can see, look, it's right on top now. Do you see that? It's just a simple shape, kind of the shape of the dark area here, and then put it on top, and then just blur it will help it blend with the object underneath it. So it looks like it's kind of floating on top, but it's not just floating there, it's kind of blurred with the one underneath it. Now I could have made this a little bit more complex. You can do small little shapes also, because if you look at this area, it's not all one color, right? It's a little brighter on this side and it's a little darker here. So you could really go through and make multiple pieces and then blur them together. Remember in the clouds, you can blur more than one object at a time. So you could really spend some time making, something with multiple colors like you see here, and then blur just a little bit, not too much of a blur, but if you look at it, you could see it's a darker area. And then for the stem, because I'm running out of time, I'm doing this kind of quick. I could do the same thing. I'm going to use, just use the pencil tool or use the pen tool. Maybe make my little stem here. There we go. Little stem action. Maybe give that a gradient mesh to add some color to it. Boom, right there in the middle. Maybe make it a little brighter. Ooh, that's pretty ugly. Gray in there. Oh, none of these colors are working for me here. I don't know. Whoosh, that's pretty ugly. But hey, it's a stem. So I got a stem now. And then, of course, you got your leaf here. Then I have the leaf could use a gradient mesh also. Leaf. The leaf has a very texture on the outside. And that could have a gradient mesh in there. Then the leaf has some lines in it. You could just use a pencil tool for that without no fill, kind of a stroke. Let me delete. Of course, you'll spend like 4 or 5 hours making it perfect, won't you? There you go. Okay, I'm running out of time here. I'm doing it very quick here. Look at it. There we go. There you got our leaf. Okay, so I know the white lines don't look like the ribs of the, I guess they're called ribs, right? But again, you now know there's something called transparency, right? So I can select all my white lines right there. I can go into my transparency setting and I could turn these down. And if I put my leaf back on top of that, oh, there they go. It kind of starts blending with it, right? You maybe even use a blending mode. There we go. Screen. Or maybe even blur them just a little bit. Blur those ribs or the whatever we'd call them. You can blur them a little bit. Just a little bit. Real slight blur. Maybe a little more. Not too much. There we go. So now look, if I zoom in, they don't look like a bunch of white lines. They're white lines, they are white lines, but they're white lines that have been blurred, blended in opacity. I did it real quick, but you get the concept, right? So think of all those great things: blur, blend, pattern. All those things can be used to make objects work together. They all work together. Okay, let's put it over here on my, there we go. There it is. I know I did it very quick today, but turn off that. Let's delete that. Let's delete that. Let's move this into the center. Last thing. Oh, I should have deleted one thing. Hold on. Woo! I made one mistake. Hold on. Uh-oh. I want to keep this one right here, because I'm going to use that as a shadow. So last thing, I'm getting so close to being done here. Okay, so I have my apple. One thing that also makes it look like it's 3D is, of course, a shadow. So remember how I duplicated this before, right? Duplicated that for the pattern. I'm going to use the same shape for a shadow underneath my object. Now, if you looked at my object, you can see it's kind of bright here, so this lighting is coming from that direction. So here's how I make a shadow real quick and dirty, because we're running out of time here. Quick and dirty shadow. Make it black. Black object. Squish it down so it looks like it's on a plane, right? And then blur it. Blur it. Where's my blur? Blur, blur, blur. Oh, not that one. Blur. Gaussian blur. And then put it underneath your object. And then, of course, move it so it's underneath your object. And a quick and dirty shadow. Probably use some opacity. Maybe rotate it a little bit. There we go. There we go. But a quick and dirty way of making a shadow is just to duplicate the object, make it dark, blur it, and I have an apple with a shadow. Do you see how I did that? Just make it black, blur it, put it behind it. Hands up.